So, good evening, sir. I am Sumangal on behalf of ECL United Trichy, and I'll be hosting this webinar.
Yeah.
Sir, so at the outset, could you tell us more, a little bit more about yourself, board doing startup ecosystem?
About the startup ecosystem, you just want me to generally talk about it?
As in, sir, about the how 91 Springboard is helping the startup ecosystem.
Sure. So basically, we started about 2.5 years ago, and the thought was to be able to help entrepreneurs and accelerate them in the various gaps that we were seeing. It turned out that we felt there was 5 things that entrepreneurs could benefit from. First and foremost, infrastructure. Secondly, services. Third is networking. Fourth is knowledge. And fifth is capital. Doing these 5 things in an a la carte manner to entrepreneurs, then they can get springboarded to the next level. So with that philosophy, we created now 3 co-working spaces around the country. There are many HR, accounting, admin, PR, digital marketing, design, UI, UX, legal, technology professionals that work in these spaces. So it creates this offline marketplace where a startup can reach out to these professionals, and what that does is it creates the services that they need. The third and fourth things I said was networking and knowledge. How we facilitate that is if we have 6 to 8 events per month per campus, and what that allows for is for people to do a lot of meetings with angel investors, mentors, potential co-founders, clients, employees, all sorts of different people. You never know who and where you end up meeting these people. But the thought is that if you create these events, they bump into these sorts of people and that benefit comes. And whenever you're bumping into people and meeting them, the thought is you're also learning from them, there's knowledge sharing happening, etc., etc. So for those reasons, we feel 91 Springboard was relevant and continues to be relevant for the startup ecosystem. The final thing that we're doing for startups is cash, right? You finally need money to grow your business. And while we don't invest directly, what we do is facilitate with angel investors as well as some VCs for the larger startups. And we make introductions and we help syndicate funding. So that's sort of a summary of what 91 Springboard is doing presently.
Okay, sir. And like, what do you usually look for in a startup or in a team before taking them on board, before helping them out? Are there any particular traits you look for, or are you focused on any sector or any set of ideas?
No, specifically, we're not in terms of sectors. So let me talk about 2 different parts of our business. So one part of our business is the co-working spaces, where all we really ask for people is that they be community-oriented people. They want to come in and help each other and gain from the community at large. So hence co-working. That's all we look for, and obviously they should be able to pay the membership fee to be here. Startups that we treat as incubatees for required that they fulfill a lot more criteria. In those cases, we're looking for people that have achieved a prototype and are in early stages of market testing and selling their product. There must be people that have already bootstrapped, which means typically invested 5 to 10 lakhs in the company to achieve this stage, quit all other opportunities, and they're just working full-time on this. So that shows a level of commitment. And we also like for such people to have a large market size or a large gap they are addressing. Like just yesterday, I was speaking with my partner Pranay, and one of the important examples he gave was that like traffic in metros is a big problem, right? And now whoever solves that, there's probably a good bunch of money to be made, whoever solves it well. And the few ways to go about this problem is you can do carpooling. Many people have tried it, but I think that has always been unsuccessful. You could try virtual conferencing and doing the Cisco telepresence type of model, but that is reliant on a good data infrastructure, which India tends to not have infrastructure. Uh, what are these large problems where if we solve them, there's going to be a great amount of value created? I think those are sort of the problems we want to tackle. If we can and solve the issues that have been tackled in the last decade, let's talk about Facebook. I mean, there's always this need for humans to communicate with each other. And when they found a platform where they could communicate with each other without one-on-one communication, you could do one-to-many communication with a large number of your friends and associates, you solved a genuine need. You've kept your not so close friend and family abreast, so when you meet them, they feel like they're in touch. So it served a genuine purpose. So things like this, when there's a large opportunity that's solved, clearly you unlock a lot of value, and those are the ones we're mostly excited about.
Okay, sir. So shall we move on to a few questions which were posed by the participants?
Absolutely.
So, sir, one question has come from Ashish Dayal. He wants to know what before starting a startup, whether the idea, the product is more important, or the team he will be working with. From an investment point of view, also, would the investor place more emphasis on the team, or would he place more emphasis on the product itself?
So I've heard enough of both sides. The first idea I'll debunk is that a lot of people believe the value is the idea. The idea is worth close to nothing, and because today there is very little outright innovation. There is a lot of good ideas which is modifications of previously existing ideas, and that value addition comes from the high, which comes from a solid team. So just an idea is clearly not the value. Maybe it's 5% of the value or 10% of the value of a business, nothing more than that. To that extent, you realize most VCs don't even sign NDAs. An NDA is a non-disclosure agreement. VC says, "यार तेरे idea में थोड़ा ना value है, मतलब जो तू करेगा, what you execute." Sorry, I switch to Hindi, and I recognize maybe not everybody speaks, but it really depends on the execution of the team and not the ideas. Definitely put the idea aside. Mature company that has some traction, what is more valuable? Is it the team, or is it the business? Is it the business concept itself? At this point, it starts to become closer to 60-40 or maybe 50-50, because at this point the product market fit has been achieved. So that main value addition is done, and following which the major efforts that are to be done by the team is towards expansion or growth. And because it's expansion or growth, this is fairly, well, it is a little bit easier than the original product market fit. So consequently, if I meet a startup and has got few lakhs of revenues, I put a little less emphasis on the team, versus when I meet a team that is still in the idea stages or in the product prototyping stages, I put a lot more emphasis on the team. And it's a roundabout answer, but hopefully I've answered your question.
Yes, sir. That was a really good answer. You had mentioned about the non-disclosure agreement, so there is another question which is related to that. So,
Okay.
how can a team stay assured that their ideas are not stolen? Because there's a lot of buzz going on about IP rights, and also without an NDA, how assured can the team be that the ideas are not used elsewhere?
Right. So I encourage a team to deeply think about their business. A rehash of an existing idea with some small modifications and hopefully a lot better execution. Genuinely, like, discovered something. When I say discovered something new, if you're the inventor of 3D printing, are you the hydrogen-based car fuel? Are you the inventor of time travel? Are you the inventor? Those are clearly breaking ideas. But like there's a social network, and you're making one new social network a bit of difference you like and unlike, and there's minor changes, I would absolutely not be worried about intellectual property ideas and NDA because there isn't that much value there. So unless you're truly groundbreaking, like the barriers of physics or chemistry and creating something new, I won't be too worried. And the majority, like, and by majority I mean 99% of businesses or ideas that I see tend to fall in the category where they are not groundbreaking. They will be very useful businesses, but they're not groundbreaking from an innovation perspective, and don't need to be worried about NDAs and patents and IP is my view.
Okay, sir. And what are the most important things that teams should keep in mind while pitching their ideas, be it to an angel investor or a venture capitalist? What are the things which turn out to be the differentiators while pitching
Right.
their idea?
So just remember, every VC is probably seeing typically 100 to 200 ideas per month. Okay, so they're overloaded. You have to stand out. So when you're pitching, very quickly get to what is different about your business. Tell them what problem you're solving and how you solved it. And if you can do that typically within a minute or maximum two, you've got their attention. Otherwise, they've already tuned off. They started ticking on their mobile phones, and the rest half an hour they're nodding and saying yes, but not really listening. So the thought is in those first 1 to 2 minutes, tell them what problem you solved, why you believe your problem is, your solution is unique, and how big of an opportunity you've solved. If you can, try to throw in some traction numbers right here. So now you've got the guy tuned. Now the guy's like, oh, they're solving this problem, this is how they're going about it, and they've already got this much traction, these many customers, these many dollars, these many rupees. Like, if you can say that in the 1 to 2 minutes, you got their attention, then start to talk about other things, like how you went about it, who is on the team, how much money have you raised, how much are you looking for, what are you going to do with it, what are your growth projections, all of that can follow. Crux, I think, is banging down on these 2 3 items in the short 1 2 minutes you meet them in a good punchy delivery. If you stutter and you stammer, and even if you have the best pitch in the world but you aren't effective at delivering it, I mean, you're not going to enjoy watching it. Simple example is there's so many movies with great ideas, but if there's bad acting, you're not going to want to watch it, right? So same thought.
Cool, sir. And you had mentioned about the growth projections and numbers, basically. So if
Yeah.
a team doesn't have prior financial know-how, so how should they deal with this part, especially with the revenue projections, which most investors would like to see in addition to the solidness of the idea?
Right. So you're saying if an engineer doesn't know how to create a financial model, what should they do? Is that the question?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So remember, anybody creating a financial model knows less maths than most engineers, right? A model, the most complex math in a model is discounted cash flow, and discounted cash flow at its root is just compounding, right? So if you guys can figure that out, there's nothing complex to figure out over here. Um, but yes, because you're not used to seeing the maths done in that manner, it can take a little while to learn. But by little, I was just at there's a startup group called SLP, which is the Startup Leadership Program, and they gather every week and they discuss various startup topics. And last week I was at T Labs, which is the Times of India Labs, is their accelerator in Delhi, in Noida. So I was giving a session on exactly this, modeling and finance. My Excel, I showed them the business model of 91 Springboard, and I said, this is how I'm forecasting and projecting my business model. This is my cash flows, and this is my discounted cash flow on that basis. And within 2 hours, in a 2 hour session, everybody was feeling comfortable enough that if they got just a copy of my model, they could just plug in their numbers and do enough to interest any investors. So in order to help anybody, if a template model is helpful, I'm happy to share that. But in general, a 2-hour session with somebody who knows what they're talking about is all you need. It's not that complex. It's addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, and some compounding, and there's nothing fancy there, I promise you.
Okay, sir. And this is a question. They want to know about exit options and how to negotiate with investors about the same.
Okay. So an exit means a sale of your company. Is that what you're saying?
No, sir. The exit options which investors seek.
Okay. So to understand the exit options they seek, we must understand what is the source of funding for a VC, right? A VC, a rich person in the sense like they're not investing their own money. What they've done is they're a well-networked person. They go to a lot of rich people and they say, look, I want to create $100 million fund and I want to invest $5 million in 20 companies over the next 5 years. And then I would have put these $5 million into these 20 companies, so say 4 companies per year for 5 years. And then in the following 5 years, these companies will be maturing because you have to give at least 5 years after you put in the money for the value to accrue. So in about 10 odd years, I will return your money. So the smart guy who knows financial management goes to a bunch of rich people who have hundreds of crores to give them these 5, 10, 15, 20 crores to get to their 100 million or 600 crore kitty, right? So when they take this money, they are normally committing a few things. One is in how many years will they return the money? Two, what is the expected rate of return? 3, when will the VC be earning and how much will they be earning? And then 4, there are some things like we will only take money if we create more than inflation. There will be a certain benchmark or a milestone which we will over exceed before taking money, blah, blah, blah. So these are sort of the miscellaneous additionals. But the core is the items I said previously. So because it is on these bases that a VC is raising from investors, they are when they invest into a startup to follow by those guidelines, because they've raised the money stating some things. Now they have to return the money on that same basis, otherwise they'll be in default and nobody will give them money again. So they're also sort of in a difficult position. Everybody thinks VCs, oh, these guys are gods, this, that. But the VCs are also a little screwed because they've taken somebody else's money on top of which they're supposed to make money. And if they make money, they get to give a percentage of that additional return they produce. So the limitations is generally governed by 1, the time frame, and 2, the percentage of return they have to produce is the 2 general things. So in this case, when I said the time frame, if you were a company that the fund invested in its first year of existence, then you've sort of got 10 years before they need to take money back. But if you were a company they invested in the 5th year of their existence, which is the last year of investments, then the startup has to repay within 5 years because the fund is going to close in 10 years. So that's one of the things. Second is if the company is not seeming like they're going to go towards IPO, or they are not going to produce enough cash to repay the investors at say a 3x or a 5x return, which most VCs are looking for. Typically between a 5 to 10x return is what most VCs are looking for. If you're unable to return that through either cash flows or through an IPO, then a VC says, look, you're not able to do this. I'm going to go meet some senior guys at certain companies that might be interested in acquiring you, and I'm going to force you to sell to them so that I can get my return, because now my time period is ending. I have to return money to my investors, so I'm going to force this exit. And they have a clause in the term sheet which is called a drag along. So they could negotiate a good deal for their 20% stake, as an example, that they have in your company. Then you are forced to sell the remaining 75% of your company to that investor also, because those are the terms they agreed. So did that answer your question?
Yes, sir. And sir, if you can click on the sidebar, there is a Q&A button. There are a few questions which participants have posed right now.
Okay. I'm on my mobile, so let me see if I can get to it. So I can see the message from you.
If you want, sir, I can read out those questions.
Please, if you don't mind. Yeah.
Yes, sir, sure. This is a question from Jinay Mehta. He
Yeah.
wants to know what would be the better way to start a business among the following: a partnership firm, an LLP, or a private company?
Good question and a very common early stage question. So so you said LLP, partnership, and private limited, right?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So a partnership has no shares. That is its downfall. And LLP again has no shares. But actually, let me do this in a more nice way. I'm going to start again. Sorry. So a general partnership. The pros: very little regulatory filings, relatively quick to set up. Only two people are required to start it up. The cons: it has no shares. So if you want an external investor to ever come in, there's no shares. The investor can't come in, you can't do a valuation. All of that becomes very difficult. Another con is that if something goes wrong, like you borrow or well, typically if you borrow money and the company is unable to return it, then whichever party has lent you the money has the ability to come to the partners and collect the money. So they can take personal goods, flat, or if you own a car, or if you own a bike, they can take that to recollect their loans. So in a general partnership, this is one of the concerns. A general partnership can be easily converted to a private limited at a later date. So because of its pros, you might want to use it as a starting vehicle, and then when you're becoming more formal or more professional, you can convert it into a company without losing the history. Um, Next one is limited liability partnership, which is an LLP. Its primary benefit over a general partnership is that the lender cannot come and take your private assets. They cannot say that I lent the company, and because the company is folding up and unable to pay now, you as individuals, you sell your cars, you give me your car, you sell your house. It cannot do that. That's a primary difference. For this difference, there is the additional responsibility, there is more regulation, you do have to file more paperwork, etc., etc. And LLP is a typical model used by legal firms, accounting firms, and these sorts of organizations which do a lot of professional services type of work, and they collect capital and they repay that money, they pay that money to the various partners. LLP is also more efficient than a private limited in terms of taxes. There is a concept called dividend distribution tax, which is essentially the profits of a company creates, it can distribute to its founders, promoters, investors, etc., which is taxed at a rate of, I believe it is 20% in the latest Companies Act, but I might be a little mistaken, but it is in that ballpark, 20%. Now, in a dividend distribution tax, so profit can be paid back to founders at a lower cost more efficiently. So another advantage of an LLP compared to a private limited. This is also the case in a general partnership. You can pay the profits without needing to pay this tax. In a private limited, the pros are investments are easy. It's the widely accepted easy format for foreign and Indian investors to come in, come out, them to have clear understanding and access to how many shares they own, etc. It's all quite crystal clear in a private limited company. Unfortunately, for that, you do have to bear the issues of higher taxation or dividend distribution. You have to bear higher regulatory expenses, which means there's more audits, there are more quarterly filings. So a lot of company secretary and chartered accountant work goes in, and you have to bear those fees and that effort of producing that documentation. But it is because you do all of this documentation that creates transparency in your organization, which makes investors comfortable with the investment in the first place, right? Because in a chota company, in a small company, a general partnership, or even a sole proprietorship, because you don't have all this transparency, it makes an investor jittery. But in a private limited, because you're forced to do all of this documentation, it makes investors a little bit more comfortable. If we do the natural next step is a public limited company, right? And in that case, there's even more, but consequently those are the companies that go public, right? They're traded on stock markets where you have to give lots and lots of information that makes people comfortable. Consequently, they're going to come to you. So it's a chicken and egg. More effort on documentation transparency facilitates more and more investment. So it's a call. You have to decide what is right for your company at which time.
Thank you, sir. And there's another question from Prabhakar Singh. He wants to know how social media based startups should project their financial plan to potential investors, because generally they don't earn till they reach a certain level, till they become moderately successful. So, how do they project their financial plan?
So I'm unclear if Prabhakar is asking about social media services startups or social media product startups. So let me try to address both. A services startup is typically going to be limited in scale and size, so investors normally are not excited about services startups. Like if there's 5 or 10 people coding and making apps, normally you won't get investment from a sexy VC. You might get investment from an uncle or somebody like that to set up, to buy your computers, to pay your office rent, and then you will produce all this software and sell it to various companies, make revenue, and pay that loan or pay profits to your uncle. But most services companies have this limitation because they aren't going to hit that proverbial hockey stick. The services companies will always be limited by the amount of quality talent you can bring in and how that can scale. And typically, services companies don't scale massively. The social media product companies, in my mind, are companies like Twitter or Facebook or Instagram or Pinterest. These are social media product companies. These are clearly scalable businesses, and this is where it becomes really exciting for investors. They're willing to revenues. If they can see engagement with your user base and a fast growing user base, people are willing to invest because they know that later on you'll be able to convert it into revenues, typically in an advertising model, but perhaps other models also. So I think investment into a services-based business is almost a mute conversation. It will be at a small level. It will be from a friendly investor, and in a product company, it has to be of the nature that I mentioned. And then the upside can be humongous, as we all know. There are many recent darlings in the social media space, and perhaps you're going to be the next one about it.
Yes, sir, absolutely. And the next question is, if the idea product which needs a lot of capital to set up production or manufacturing, how does the team go about executing it?
Right. So in India, there is a lot of SME loans that are available from banks against assets, which is project financing, etc., etc. So that is quite common in a country like India, where you can find for businesses which have fixed assets. People are that if you screw up and you go out of business, they can reclaim the asset and they can sell it and at least get 60-70% or 80% of their money back. So that is quite common, and the banks are your usual source for it. Traditional banks, PSU banks, even organizations like SIDBI. So these are typically the locations you will get money for that, not a VC and not those sorts of firms. That's the quick answer.
Okay, sir. And this is another question from Ashish. So he wants to know, if someone is just out of college, he has worked with a startup, and he now has a basic prototype of his own product, and he is looking forward for funding, then what are the challenges which he might face?
So in India, the investors are a little spoiled. There's always been a demand-supply imbalance. There's more startups looking for funding and fewer people investing. That imbalance is correcting, but it is still imbalanced in favor of the investors. So the investors are spoiled and they can pick and choose where they want. So what they've done is classically look for less riskier businesses, and by that I mean that are in later stages of their own development. So startups that have gone beyond the plan stage, market fit stage, and are now in early stages of growth, that's where most of the money comes in India. And so you have to have some level of traction before a professional or former investor is willing to look at you. So in India, if you're looking for funding, you need to get some traction, which means whatever business model you have, whatever product you have, whether it is revenues, whether it's engaged users, whether it's customers, or I mean some sort of number which shows that your business is the value it's creating is growing month on month on month. That is what is going to enable you to get funding. In the West, because there is far more investors, the supply demand balance is almost the opposite, where a startup idea, but they haven't even proven themselves by building a product or doing something like that. They can raise money because investor feels like if I wait for the startup to prove themselves, then so many investors will jump in, I won't even get a chance at the deal. So there they have the flip problem. A startup, even if it hasn't even proven themselves by building a product or doing something like that, they can raise money because investor feels like if I wait for the start.
Varun Chawla went on. Why our business review?
Hi, sorry, I think I got disconnected.
Yes, sir, you're back on.
Yeah.
So the next question is from Parth. He wants to know how
Go ahead.
important the prototype of the idea is while pitching, and what if the prototype is not ready?
Uh, if the prototype is not ready, you better be a damn good salesman. I mean, at the end, you're selling something to somebody and you can't even show them what you're selling. I mean, it's going to be pretty hard, no? So fundamentally, I don't suggest that idea unless, like I said, you're a damn good salesman. So I don't have.
Okay, sir. And the next question is from a team which is trying to bring back traditional Indian recipes for the modern generation. So in this context, they would like to know how to brand these products, how to build a more modern image around them.
Right. So I'll go one step back. I've always felt that whenever you're building a business, the first and foremost thing is understand who your customer is. Like at some level, you have a gut feel of who's going to be your buyer, but you have to confirm this assumption by perhaps taking a few of your products and giving to them as samples and seeing how they're reacting and experimenting with perhaps two, three different demographics. I don't know if it is male, female, married, unmarried, so and so age versus so and so age. I don't know what the demographic is, but once you have a few assumptions, you go and test your product on them. Once you figure out what this demographic is, then again you come up with two, three types of names. One that might be funky and young, one might be traditional, one might have a meaning in mythological Indian things, one might just be a random collection of words that sound of letters that sounds cool. Then you come up with these three, four, and you start to do little focus groups, which is talk to your friends, talk to the same customer base, see what their reaction is, and that's typically the way to figure out a name in the most scientific manner. In a typical business, you don't have the benefit of doing all of this because getting 50 of your customers or even a statistically significant 30 customers in the same room is not easy, or 30 customers do not be in the same room, but just access to them is not easy. So if you do get at least 5, 10 such people, brainstorm with them, you share some ideas you have, get the verbal feedback, and that typically becomes the basis in most startups. But this is if given the benefit of unlimited resources, time, and access to customers, the first way I was suggesting that's the ideal way to do it.
Okay, sir. And there is another question from Vignesh. He wants to know if it is possible to approach foreign investors. If Indian startups can approach foreign investors, and if possible, how to go about it.
Yes, you can approach foreign investors in India, but you have to make sure that you have the right Sorry, guys, I think I lost you again.
Yes, sir, you're back on.
I'll answer the question on foreign investors now. Foreign investors are clearly located in another country, so they're used to different set of rules and regulations and laws than say a place like India. India was recently ranked by the UN as the 140th, 140 easiest country to do business in, which is not flattering. So consequently, it is a little worrisome for foreign investors. What I have seen and people have success with is when they create companies internationally. So they'll set up a company in the US itself or even Singapore, I have heard. And also, then you will have to make a trip to those countries, create the networks, who investors, where investor, how to meet them, all of that wherewithal you have to have, the funds to travel, etc. You have to have. In which case, I've heard of success. As an example, there was a startup with two IIT Delhi guys and one IIT Kanpur, I want to say, but I might be mistaken. But three guys, they had an idea for the financial services industry, and what they did was they made a video of their product and they pitched it to probably many investors. One of them was an accelerator in the US, and the accelerator liked the idea so much they gave them, I think, $120,000. And then these guys started to make the product, realized the product was very hard to make. The financial services industry that they were excited in pitching to wasn't interested in the product. So at the end, they raised the money, but it went nowhere. So it is possible, but if you don't have a good product, failure can also happen very soon. And all three of those founders are now doing different businesses. Some have taken jobs, some are trying other startups. So we'll see. So the Indian way, even though it's hard to raise capital in the beginning, I think it's kind of good because only proven ideas get funded. So it's slightly harder to prove your idea, but once you prove it and you get the backing, the chances of success is far greater if you get funded in India, is my opinion.
Okay, sir. And we have another question from Kashish. He wants to know if someone wants to bring about new technology in the agriculture industry, and what market strategy should they follow in case the product is not patented, and should they target farmers through the government or should they directly approach the farmers?
Me?
Sir, could you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
I'll repeat the question.
Yeah.
Uh, Kashish wants to know if someone wants to bring about a new technological change in the agriculture industry, what market strategy should they follow if it's not a patented product? Should they target farmers through the government or should they directly approach the farmers?
See, as soon as in general, again, I'm talking big picture principle, I've never done this, but I've always believed if you go through the government, yes, you have massive reach, but to get government approvals is a long process. It takes a lot of sometimes palm greasing, it definitely takes a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of paperwork, a lot of time, a lot of funds. So I would always suggest a dual strategy where you're going direct, and because on day one you can go to a customer, you'll also hear their complaints or their satisfaction with your product, you get the feedback instantaneously, and you will start to move product. You'll figure out your manufacturing, the benefits of your process, if it's working, if it's not, whatever be it. So you should always start to go direct. It does make sense to start leveraging any government avenues available, but don't rely on them. If you rely on them, then it doesn't come through. Then you're kind of stuck. So go to farmers directly, use the benefit of their feedback, improve your product, and continue to do that. At the same time, do also try to work the government angles would be my way of doing things.
So the next question is from Anshuman. He wants to know that someone who's planning on starting a consultancy firm, what kind of permits or copyrights do they need to obtain, if any?
Typically, there's none. I mean, you set up an LLP. Typically, that's what's used by most consultants, and yeah, and then you're off to the races. If you can convince somebody that your information or knowledge is worth something, and they're paying you for it, you have a working consultancy firm.
Okay, sir. So we have a last couple of questions. So
Okay.
these are very generic. What do you think are the most common reasons why startups fail?
Most common reasons startups fail.
Yes, sir.
Okay. I think there's two. One is internal team issues, where they fight over either salary or the business model or equity or things like that. Some sort of instability. One of the founders has to go get a job. One of them, the family is pressuring him to do something else. Those sorts of things. So team instability. And the second one, according to me, is not deeply thought out business models where they just get started without considering how things are going to work, and then a few months down the line, when they get all the feedback from customers or suppliers, they start to realize that it's just not viable. I think those are the two big ones.
And in a continuation to that, what do you think are the most common traits in successful startups?
I just reverse the 2 points I said. Great teams, well thought out business ideas, tackling large problems, and they have deep insight into them. One of the things I have seen frequently is that with a younger audience, like I imagine is online today, B2C or ideas that you have been exposed to from a young age are the ones that you are going to be good at, because you've been, say, a consumer of McDonald's for 5 years. So you know how that model works. If you are to create a new fast food chain, or if you are to create a product that is related to fast food, you'll be far better at it than if you try to create a technology that is used by the travel industry. Just because you have to typically have 5 to 10 years of experience to that industry to be good at it. So it means that older people, typically in their late 20s, early 30s, even 40s, people who've been in industry for 5, 10, 15 years are the ones who are going to be good at solving those sorts of problems, which require deep industry insight, which are of a B2B nature and of a B2C nature, because we've been consumers of it for much of our lives, even though we're not working adults at this point. We're far better equipped to reverse engineer those sorts of businesses or add value in those sorts of businesses. So I just feel success will lay more in those fields for a younger entrepreneur. I know you didn't ask the question, but I sort of just started talking about it.
Yes, sir. And there's another question which has just come up. Vignesh wants to know whether the government is providing any loans for startups.
Yeah. So SIDBI, SIDBI, I forget the full form, but the last three digits are, I think, Development Bank of India. They offer loans through colleges also. Like somebody in your college might have already, like the incubator or the e-cell, you guys can actually create a relationship with SIDBI and provide loans to various startups. Additionally, you can also directly reach out to them, and they do provide such loans for early startup businesses. Apart from that, there are accelerators which will provide funding at the prototyping and the early product market fit stages. These organizations are Venture Nursery in Mumbai. It is T Labs in Delhi, and it is GSF, which is Global Super Angels Fund, which is, I think, both in Delhi and Bangalore, if I'm not mistaken, perhaps even in Bombay. They're multi-location. So these are some of the types of accelerators. I'm sure there's more. Oh yeah, there's Chiron in Bangalore, which is also well known. So all of these guys, in addition to some incubators which will have a tie-up with Sidbay.
Okay, sir. And any final thoughts, suggestions, advice for our viewers?
No, in general, I think entrepreneurship is a fascinating line of work. I'm doing my sixth startup at this point. I wouldn't live life any other way. I love finding challenges and solving them. It is sometimes difficult, but that is what makes this exciting. And if solving challenges and overcoming adversity is your thing, you're a stubborn guy that isn't going to take no for an answer, and is if you hit a hard wall, you will try punching it. If that doesn't work, you will try headbutting it. If that doesn't work, you will drive a motorcycle into it. If that doesn't work, you will walk along it until you find the wall that ends and then cross it, or you will find a way to pole vault over it. You will find a way to cross it. It's just a exercise in overcoming adversity and creating benefits in terms of new goods and services for your fellow mankind. So I think it's a fantastic pursuit, and its most beneficial benefit for India right now is employment. India has a massive number of sub 18-year-olds that are going to be entering the workforce in the next decade, and entrepreneurship is proven to be the largest creator of jobs. So if you guys become entrepreneurs, that someday you're going to be responsible for creating jobs, which is one of the largest things any growing economy needs, and India more so than any.
Thank you, sir. On behalf of eCell, I'd like to thank you for taking out your valuable time, sharing your insights and knowledge with the audience. And we'd love to be associated with you in the future also. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, sir.